I've spent the last 15 years investigating cold cases, walking through crime scenes that haunt other people's nightmares, but nothing prepared me for what I discovered about the Torres family. What started as a routine missing persons case in 1990 became something that fundamentally changed how I understand the boundaries between life and death. The truth about what happened to Miguel Torres, his wife Carmen, and their 3 children didn't surface until technology caught up with the horror they left behind. The case first crossed my desk as a footnote in a larger study of wilderness disappearances. 5 names in a database, 5 faces smiling from a family photo taken just days before they vanished. But something about their story pulled at me, refused to let go. Maybe it was the precision of Miguel's planning, or the athletic prowess that should have kept them safe, or simply the complete absence of any logical explanation for their disappearance. Whatever it was, the Torres family became my obsession. Miguel Torres was the kind of man who made running look effortless, but there was something deeper driving him than simple athleticism. At 38, he'd completed 7 marathons with times that put him in the top 5% of his age group. His basement was a shrine to endurance sports, medals hanging from carefully organized displays, race photos documenting years of competitions, training logs filled with meticulous handwriting that tracked every mile, every split time, every elevation gain. His wife Carmen matched his dedication with a quiet intensity that spoke to something almost spiritual in her relationship with running. At 35, she'd been a track star at University of Colorado, holding the school record in the 10,000 meters for 3 years before someone finally broke it. Even after 3 children and a decade away from competitive racing, her morning runs were legendary in their suburban Denver neighborhood. Neighbors would set their watches by the sound of her footsteps hitting the pavement at exactly 5:47 a.m., rain or shine, summer or winter. Their children had inherited more than just athletic genes. They'd absorbed their parents' relationship with the wilderness like it was part of their DNA. 14-year-old Sophia moved through the mountains with a grace that made experienced hikers stop and stare. She'd been breaking school cross-country records since 7th grade, but more importantly, she understood terrain in ways that couldn't be taught. She could read weather patterns in cloud formations, identify edible plants by their subtle characteristics, navigate by stars when GPS failed. The twins, Marco and Luna, were only 11, but had already accumulated more wilderness experience than most adults ever would. They could set up camp in darkness, start fires in wet conditions, and move through rough terrain with the efficiency of creatures born for it. Marco had his father's analytical mind, always calculating distances and elevations, always planning the most efficient routes. Luna possessed her mother's intuitive relationship with the natural world, sensing changes in weather hours before they arrived, spotting animal signs that others missed entirely. This wasn't a family that took casual weekend hikes. The Torres clan approached wilderness expeditions with the same methodical preparation Miguel brought to his marathon training. Every summer trip was planned months in advance, with detailed topographical maps marked and annotated, weather patterns studied, emergency protocols established and rehearsed. They owned gear that most outdoor enthusiasts could only dream of. Equipment tested in conditions that would challenge professional expeditions. The Torres family lived for these summer expeditions with an intensity that bordered on religious devotion. Every July, they'd disappear into some remote corner of the American West, pushing their physical and mental limits on trails that would challenge seasoned mountaineers. But they weren't adrenaline junkies seeking thrills. They were methodical explorers who understood that the wilderness demanded respect, preparation, and absolute attention to detail. Miguel's planning process was a thing of beauty to witness. I've seen his notebooks preserved by his sister after the disappearance. Page after page of careful calculations, elevation profiles traced by hand, weather data collected from multiple sources and cross-referenced for accuracy. He would study satellite imagery for months, identifying potential hazards and alternative routes. He corresponded with park rangers, local hikers, anyone who had recent experience in their chosen area. Their gear selection reflected the same obsessive attention to detail. Ultralight titanium cookware that weighed ounces but could withstand temperature extremes. Sleeping bags rated for conditions far colder than they expected to encounter. Water filtration systems with multiple backup methods. First aid supplies that could handle everything from minor cuts to serious trauma. They carried emergency beacons, though in 1990 the technology was primitive compared to modern devices. Most importantly, Miguel always filed detailed itineraries with multiple people. Their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had copies of every planned route. So did Miguel's brother in Colorado Springs. The local ranger station received detailed day-by-day plans, complete with GPS coordinates for each planned campsite. This wasn't paranoia. It was the methodical approach of someone who understood that wilderness survival often depends on other people knowing exactly where to look if something goes wrong. In July 1990, they chose the Absaroka Wilderness in Montana, a decision that would haunt me for decades. This isn't casual hiking country. It's some of the most remote and challenging terrain in North America. The Absaroka Range stretches across the border between Montana and Wyoming, a geological maze of volcanic peaks, deep valleys, and hidden canyons that can swallow entire expeditions without a trace. The wilderness area encompasses over 940,000 acres of roadless terrain, where grizzly bears, mountain lions and wolves outnumber human visitors by impossible ratios. Weather can change from pleasant hiking conditions to life-threatening storms in minutes. The elevation ranges from 5,500 feet in the valleys to over 12,000 feet at the peaks, creating microclimates that can trap unprepared hikers in deadly conditions. But it wasn't the obvious dangers that drew the Torres family to Absaroka. It was the pristine beauty and the challenge of navigating terrain that tests even experienced wilderness travelers. Miguel had planned a 5-day loop trail that would take them through some of the most spectacular and isolated country on the continent. The route included sections that barely qualified as trails, requiring navigation skills and wilderness experience that few families possessed. I've walked that same route dozens of times in the years since their disappearance, and I can understand why it appealed to them. The first day follows a well-maintained trail through dense forest, gradually climbing toward the alpine zone. The second day breaks into open meadows filled with wildflowers, with views that stretch for hundreds of miles across untouched wilderness. But it's the third day where the real challenge begins, where the maintained trail ends and hikers must navigate by compass and topographical map through terrain that changes character completely. Miguel had researched every mile obsessively, marking water sources, identifying potential hazards, noting escape routes in case of emergency weather. He'd even contacted other hikers who'd completed similar routes, collecting first-hand information about conditions and potential problems. The route he planned would challenge his family's abilities without exceeding their experience level. At least that was the theory. The last confirmed sighting was at the Beartooth Pass entrance on July 15, 1990, at exactly 8:23 a.m., according to the ranger station log. Park Ranger David Chen remembered them with the kind of clarity that comes when something ordinary becomes significant only in retrospect. I interviewed Chen multiple times over the years, and his recollection never wavered in the smallest detail. "They had that look," he told me during our first meeting in 2003. "You know how some families just move together like they're choreographed? The kids weren't dragging their feet or complaining about pack weight. The parents weren't constantly checking gear or looking worried. They moved like they belonged out there, like they were heading home instead of into wilderness that kills people who make small mistakes." Chen remembered Miguel's careful questions about recent trail conditions, weather forecasts, and bear activity reports. He remembered Carmen studying the topographical map on the ranger station wall, tracing their planned route with her finger while asking about stream crossings and potential mudslide areas. Most vividly, he remembered the children. Sophia helping her younger siblings adjust their pack straps, Marco double-checking their compass readings against the map, Luna identifying bird calls from species she'd apparently studied beforehand. They signed the trail register at 8:23, Chen told me. Miguel wrote in block letters, very neat handwriting. Date, time, destination, expected return date, number of people, emergency contacts, everything exactly right. I watched them head up the trailhead around 8:30, and Sophia turned back to wave at me from the first bend in the trail. That's the image that stayed with me. This confident, happy kid waving goodbye before disappearing into the trees. The trail register entry still exists in the Park Service archives. I've seen it myself, 5 names written in Miguel's precise handwriting, followed by the detailed itinerary they'd filed earlier. Their signatures are confident, relaxed, the marks of people who expected to be back in exactly 5 days, with stories to tell and photos to develop. There's nothing in that entry to suggest they had any premonition of what was coming. Weather conditions were perfect that first day, clear skies, mild temperatures, no wind. The forecast called for typical summer mountain weather throughout their planned expedition. Warm days, cool nights, possible afternoon thunderstorms, but nothing severe. Trail conditions were excellent according to recent reports. Recent bear activity was minimal. Stream levels were normal for the season. Every factor that could influence their safety was optimal. When they failed to return on July 19th as scheduled, their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, contacted authorities immediately. She'd been watching for their return with the kind of attention that comes from genuine concern for people you care about. Mrs. Patterson knew the Torres family's habits, understood their reliability, recognized that missing their expected return time meant something had gone seriously wrong. The initial response was swift and professional. Park Service protocols for overdue hikers kicked in immediately, with ranger teams mobilizing for what everyone assumed would be a standard search and rescue operation. Most overdue hikers are found within 24 hours, usually due to minor injuries, navigation errors, or simply underestimating travel times. The Torres family's experience and preparation suggested they'd be found quickly, probably with a reasonable explanation for their delay. But this search was different from the beginning. The first ranger team to reach their abandoned vehicle found it exactly where it should be, parked properly at the designated trailhead, locked and secure. Their registration paperwork was in perfect order. Nothing appeared disturbed or hurried. It looked like a family that expected to return, not like people fleeing from danger or dealing with an emergency. The search expanded rapidly as the first 24 hours passed without contact. By the second day, over 40 searchers were combing the wilderness. Park rangers, volunteer search and rescue teams, local law enforcement, even military personnel from nearby bases who specialized in wilderness operations. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras scanned vast areas of terrain that would take ground teams days to cover. Search dogs arrived on the third day, including some of the most experienced wilderness tracking teams in the region. These weren't ordinary police dogs. They were animals trained specifically for finding people in remote terrain, capable of following scent trails that were days old across miles of rugged country. The dogs immediately picked up the Torres family's scent at the trailhead, following it confidently up the initial section of trail. For the first 12 miles, the search proceeded exactly as expected. The dogs followed a clear scent trail along the planned route, occasionally stopping to investigate areas where the family had rested or stopped for water. Ground search teams found evidence of their passage. A boot print in soft soil here, a broken branch there, the kind of minimal traces that experienced hikers leave even when trying to minimize their impact. They found the family's first campsite exactly where Miguel's itinerary indicated it would be. The site was pristine, organized with the kind of attention to detail that characterized everything the Torres family did. a perfect circle of stones for a campfire, carefully arranged to minimize impact on the surrounding vegetation. Not a piece of litter anywhere, not even a scrap of paper or food wrapper. The tent site was selected to minimize environmental damage while providing optimal shelter from weather. Evidence at the campsite confirmed that all 5 family members had been present and healthy. Multiple sets of footprints in various sizes, including the distinctive tread patterns from their hiking boots that had been documented at the trailhead. Soil analysis even revealed traces of their specific soap and toothpaste, confirming normal evening hygiene routines. Everything suggested a family enjoying a successful first day of their planned expedition. But it was after that first campsite, where the Torres family story entered territory, that challenged everything searchers thought they understood about wilderness disappearances. The scent trail continued strong for several more miles, following their planned route with no indication of distress or deviation. The dogs showed no confusion, no signs that the family had wandered off course or encountered difficulties. Then, at a specific rocky outcropping approximately 7 miles from the trailhead, something impossible happened. The scent trail simply ended, not gradually, not with signs of dispersal or confusion that might indicate the family had separated or changed direction. It ended abruptly, completely, as if the Torres family had reached that exact spot and then ceased to exist in any form that dogs could detect. I've studied the search reports from that period, interviewed many of the participants, walked that terrain countless times myself. The rocky outcropping where the trail ended isn't particularly remarkable at first glance. A natural platform of limestone and granite about the size of a tennis court, elevated maybe 8 feet above the surrounding trail. But there's something unsettling about standing there, something that makes experienced outdoors people unconsciously want to keep moving. The search dog's behavior at that location was unlike anything their handlers had ever witnessed. These were animals with years of experience finding people in impossible conditions, dogs that could follow trails through streams, over bare rock, even after heavy rain. But at that outcropping they became agitated, confused, almost distressed. They would circle the perimeter of the rocky area, clearly detecting scent, but refused to step onto the stone surface itself. Ground searchers found no obvious explanation for the dog's behavior or the trail's abrupt termination. The rocky surface showed no signs of struggle, no blood, no dropped equipment. Visual examination revealed nothing that might explain how 5 people could simply vanish from a specific location. Rangers with decades of experience had never encountered anything similar. Usually, when scent trails end, there's some logical explanation like water crossings or severe weather that disperses the scent. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't what searchers found at the outcropping. It was what they didn't find anywhere beyond it. Ground teams spent days covering every possible route the family might have taken from that point. They checked every ravine, every game trail, every possible path through the surrounding terrain. Helicopters photographed every square meter of the surrounding area. Thermal imaging detected no heat signatures that might indicate injured or deceased humans. It was as if the Torres family had walked onto that rocky platform and then simply ceased to exist in any detectable form. Not dead, not lost, not injured somewhere nearby, just gone in the most complete sense of the word. The wilderness had swallowed them so thoroughly that not even their molecular traces remained for dogs to follow. Theories emerged as the search entered its 3rd week, each attempting to explain the impossible disappearance with rational possibilities. The grizzly bear theory was extensively investigated. The region had a healthy population of large predators, and bear attacks on humans, while rare, did occur. But bears leave evidence: disturbed ground, scattered equipment, biological traces that dogs would detect immediately. The complete absence of any such evidence made predator attack unlikely. The hidden cave theory gained more traction among searchers familiar with the area's geology. The Absaroka Wilderness sits atop extensive limestone formations riddled with cave systems, some mapped, many others still unknown to science. It was possible that the rocky outcropping concealed an entrance to one of these underground networks, an opening that the family might have discovered and explored. Cave systems in the region had trapped explorers before. In 1987, 3 experienced cavers had vanished in a complex system about 50 miles east of the Torres disappearance site. Their bodies were never recovered, though equipment was eventually found scattered through passages too narrow and dangerous for rescue teams to follow. The Torres family weren't cavers, but they were adventurous enough to investigate an interesting geological formation. But caves, like bear attacks, should leave evidence: rope marks on rock faces, disturbed soil around entrance points, equipment dropped during a hasty entry or emergency exit. Geological surveys of the outcropping area were conducted using ground-penetrating radar and seismic equipment. The results showed solid rock formation extending deep underground, with no indication of void spaces or cave entrances in the immediate area. The human predator theory was the darkest, but couldn't be dismissed entirely. The wilderness attracted all kinds of people, including some who preferred isolation for reasons that had nothing to do with nature appreciation. Drifters, fugitives, individuals with psychological problems that made civilization difficult to tolerate. The vast, roadless areas provided perfect hiding places for people who didn't want to be found. Local law enforcement investigated every known individual in the region with a history of violence or mental instability. They checked hunting camps, mining claims, and remote cabins throughout a 100-mile radius. They interviewed every person known to frequent the area, from legitimate hikers and hunters to the marginal characters who lived rough in the backcountry. Nothing emerged to suggest human involvement in the disappearance. As the search entered its 4th week, alternative theories became increasingly desperate and unlikely. Equipment failure, navigation errors, sudden illness, flash floods, rock slides — every possibility was investigated and found inadequate to explain the complete vanishing of 5 experienced people. The Torres family hadn't just died in the wilderness. They had been erased from it so thoroughly that even their traces disappeared. The formal search was called off after 28 days, though informal efforts continued for months. Volunteer groups organized weekend searches. The Torres family's relatives hired private investigators. Psychics and dowsers showed up claiming they could locate the missing family through supernatural means. None of these efforts produced anything more substantial than false hopes and additional frustration. I first learned about the Torres case in 2003, 13 years after their disappearance, when I was a rookie detective obsessed with cold cases that everyone else had given up on. My partner at the time thought it was a waste of energy. People vanish in wilderness areas every year, and most of them stay vanished. But something about the Torres story captured my imagination in ways that more conventional crimes never did. Maybe it was the precision of Miguel's planning, combined with the completeness of their disappearance. Maybe it was the image of that confident family walking into the wilderness with everything they needed to survive, only to vanish so thoroughly that their traces couldn't be found with the best search technology available. Or maybe it was simply the challenge of a mystery that seemed to have no solution, a puzzle that couldn't be solved with conventional investigative methods. I started making annual trips to Montana, walking the Torres family's planned route during my vacation time, talking to locals who remembered the original search, studying the terrain with fresh eyes and more time than the original searchers could devote. The rocky outcropping where their trail ended became as familiar to me as my own neighborhood. I could navigate to it in darkness, knew every crack and crevice in its surface, had examined it from every possible angle. Years accumulated like sediment layers in geological formations, each one adding weight to the mystery without bringing any clarity to its resolution. I investigated other disappearances, solved cases that had seemed impossible, failed to solve others that should have been straightforward, but I kept returning to the Torres family, kept walking those Montana trails, kept wondering what had become of them in that vast wilderness. The technology around missing person investigations evolved dramatically during those years. GPS replaced paper maps and compass navigation. Satellite phones provided communication from areas where cell towers didn't exist. Digital cameras captured evidence with resolution and detail that film could never match. Ground-penetrating radar became portable and precise enough to detect anomalies deep underground. DNA analysis advanced to the point where microscopic traces could identify individuals from samples that would have been useless decades earlier. But the Torres family had vanished in an analog world before technology could track their movements with satellite precision or preserve their final moments in digital memory. They disappeared into a void that no amount of technological advancement seemed able to penetrate. Modern equipment could analyze their abandoned campsite with forensic precision that wasn't available in 1990, but it couldn't locate them beyond that mysterious rocky outcropping. I began carrying increasingly sophisticated equipment on my annual Montana expeditions. Heart rate monitors to track my physical condition in high-altitude terrain. GPS devices that recorded my exact position every few seconds. Emergency beacons that could summon helicopter rescue from anywhere in North America. Digital cameras that documented every step of my investigation with timestamp and location data. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using technology that would have saved the Torres family if it had existed in 1990, but I was using it to search for people who had vanished, precisely because such technology hadn't been available to them. Every device I carried represented a way their tragedy could have been prevented, or at least explained, if they'd had access to it during their final expedition. By 2020, I was carrying equipment that seemed almost magical compared to what had been available when the Torres family disappeared. My smartphone had more computing power than entire government agencies possessed in 1990. Satellite communication allowed me to maintain contact with the outside world from locations more remote than anything the Torres family had planned to visit. But all this technological capability couldn't solve a 30-year-old mystery that began before such tools existed. The breakthrough came in August 2023, during what I expected to be another routine visit to the site, where the Torres family had vanished. I was carrying an Apple Watch Series 8, a device that monitored my vital signs with medical-grade precision, tracked my location using multiple satellite networks, and could detect falls or impacts that might indicate injury. The technology packed into that small device would have seemed like science fiction to searchers in 1990. The watch had been functioning normally throughout my hike to the disappearance site. Heart rate readings consistent with moderate exertion at altitude, GPS coordinates updating accurately, all systems operating within expected parameters. But as I approached the rocky outcropping where the Torres family's trail had ended 33 years earlier, the device began displaying readings that seemed impossible. At first, I assumed the irregular heart rate data was related to elevation or dehydration. High altitude affects everyone differently, and I'd been hiking for several hours in thin mountain air. But the anomalous readings weren't coming from my own cardiovascular system. They appeared to be additional heart rates detected by the watch's sensors, cardiac rhythms beyond my own, that seemed to be coming from somewhere nearby. The Apple Watch uses photoplethysmography to detect blood flow patterns through capillaries near the skin surface, measuring the slight changes in light absorption that occur with each heartbeat. It's sophisticated technology, but it's designed to detect the single heartbeat of the person wearing the device. Multiple cardiac signatures would indicate either equipment malfunction or something medically impossible. I spent over an hour testing the watch, moving around the area, checking for any source of electronic interference that might cause false readings. Cell phone signals, GPS satellites, even electromagnetic fields from geological formations can sometimes affect sensitive electronic devices. But the pattern remained consistent and impossible to explain through conventional means. Whenever I stood on the specific section of rocky outcropping where search dogs had lost the Torres family's scent in 1990, the watch detected exactly 5 distinct heartbeats beyond my own. 5 separate cardiac rhythms with slightly different rates and patterns, as if 5 different people were somehow present but invisible. When I moved even a few feet away from that location, the additional signals disappeared completely, leaving only my own heartbeat in the device's readings. The implications were impossible to accept, yet undeniable to ignore. Either my Apple Watch was experiencing the most specific and consistent malfunction in the history of consumer electronics, or something was maintaining cardiac activity beneath the ground where the Torres family had vanished 33 years earlier. 5 heartbeats, steady and strong, emanating from somewhere below solid rock where no life should exist. I documented everything obsessively. Screenshots of the heart rate readings, GPS coordinates of the exact location where the anomalous signals appeared, video recordings of the watch display showing impossible data. The evidence was thorough, but raised more questions than it answered. How could 5 people maintain heartbeats for 3 decades without food, water, medical care, or any of the biological necessities required to sustain human life? The technology that finally located the Torres family had also revealed something that challenged every assumption about what survival means, what death means, and what might exist in the spaces between those 2 states. My Apple Watch had detected life where no life should be possible, in conditions where no life could persist, maintained by mechanisms that science couldn't explain. Standing on that outcropping, watching my watch register those impossible heartbeats, I realized I'd finally found the Torres family. But the discovery was more disturbing than their disappearance had ever been. They weren't dead in any conventional sense, but they weren't alive in any way that human understanding could accommodate. They had become something else entirely, something that existed in the darkness beneath solid rock, sustained by forces that 30 years of technological advancement still couldn't explain. I contacted Geological Surveys immediately after documenting the impossible heartbeat readings, desperate for some rational explanation that would make sense of what I'd discovered. The University of Montana's Geology Department had extensive records of the Absaroka Wilderness region, including detailed analyses of the limestone formations and underground structure that had been conducted during the original search for the Torres family. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a speleologist who specialized in northwestern cave systems, agreed to meet me at the site. She brought ground-penetrating radar equipment more advanced than anything available in 1990, capable of detecting void spaces and structural anomalies deep beneath the surface. Her initial readings confirmed what earlier surveys had indicated: solid rock formation, extending down over 200 feet with no evidence of caves or hollow spaces. But Dr. Hendricks's expertise revealed details that previous investigators had missed. The limestone in that specific area showed unusual mineral compositions, with trace elements that she'd never encountered in similar geological formations. The rock itself seemed to have been altered by some process that left microscopic channels and fissures throughout its structure, creating a matrix that might conduct sound or electromagnetic signals in unexpected ways. "It's like the stone has been transformed into something organic," she told me, while studying core samples we'd extracted from the outcropping. "The mineral structure is still limestone, but it's been changed at a molecular level by some process I don't recognize. These microscopic channels could theoretically conduct bioelectric signals, though I have no idea what could create or sustain such a phenomenon." We spent 3 days at the site, using every piece of equipment Dr. Hendricks could transport to that remote location. Seismic sensors detected subtle vibrations beneath the surface that seemed to pulse in rhythms consistent with cardiac activity. Electromagnetic field detectors registered weak but persistent signals that fluctuated in patterns similar to the heartbeat readings from my Apple Watch. Even thermal imaging showed slight temperature variations in the rock surface that pulsed with the same regular timing. The evidence was accumulating, but it was evidence of something that shouldn't exist according to any known scientific principles. We were detecting signs of biological activity from beneath solid rock in an environment where no known form of life could survive. The Torres family appeared to be somehow integrated into the geological structure itself, existing in a state that challenged every assumption about the boundaries between living and non-living matter. Dr. Hendricks attempted to drill deeper core samples, hoping to find some explanation for the anomalous readings. But at a depth of approximately 12 feet, her diamond-tipped drill bits began encountering resistance that made no geological sense. The limestone should have remained uniform in density, but something was interfering with the drilling process, causing the equipment to bind and stall despite its capability to penetrate much harder rock formations. More disturbing was what happened when we finally extracted a core sample from that depth. The limestone showed distinct organic inclusions, microscopic structures that resembled cellular material but couldn't be classified as any known biological form. When examined under high-powered microscopy, these inclusions appeared to pulse with the same rhythm as the heartbeat readings detected by my watch. "I've been studying geological formations for 20 years, Dr. Hendricks told me as we packed up our equipment. "I've never seen anything like this. The rock itself has become some kind of hybrid between mineral and organic matter, sustaining biological processes through mechanisms that shouldn't be possible. Whatever happened to your missing family, they've become part of the mountain in ways that science can't explain." The official geological report listed our findings as anomalous mineral formations requiring further study. But Dr. Hendricks privately admitted that she couldn't recommend additional investigation. The implications were too disturbing, the evidence too far outside conventional understanding to be accepted by mainstream scientific institutions. The Torres family had been found, but they'd been found in a form that raised more questions about the nature of existence than anyone was prepared to answer. I returned to the site multiple times over the following months, always with the same results. My Apple Watch consistently detected 5 heartbeats beyond my own when positioned over that specific section of outcropping. The signals remained steady, strong, unchanging, despite the passage of seasons and weather. Whatever the Torres family had become during their decades beneath the mountain, they showed no signs of weakening or fading away. But the most unsettling discovery came during a winter visit in February 2024. Snow had covered the outcropping to a depth of several feet, and temperatures had dropped well below zero, conditions that should have affected any electronic readings or equipment malfunctions that might explain the anomalous heartbeat detections. But the signals remained exactly as strong as they'd been during warm weather, suggesting that whatever was generating them was insulated from surface conditions by more than just rock and soil. Standing there in the bitter cold, looking at my watch display, showing 6 heartbeats where only one should exist, I finally understood that the Torres family hadn't died in the wilderness. They had been absorbed by it, transformed into something that existed in the spaces between life and death, sustained by the mountain itself, through processes that human science couldn't comprehend or explain. The Torres family case remains officially unsolved in law enforcement databases. The heartbeat readings could be dismissed as equipment malfunction, the geological anomalies as natural formations that happen to resemble organic structures. But I know what I detected during those long hours, standing on the outcropping, where their trail ended 33 years ago. 5 distinct cardiac rhythms, steady and strong, emanating from somewhere beneath solid rock where the Torres family's journey ended and their transformation began. They're still there, still maintaining some form of existence that challenges everything we think we understand about life, death, and the mysterious processes that connect living beings to the natural world that surrounds them. Sometimes I wonder if they're aware of their condition, if they know that decades have passed while they've existed in darkness beneath the mountain. Sometimes I wonder if they're waiting for something, or if their state is permanent, an eternal existence that partakes of both life and death without fully belonging to either. The technology that found them also revealed mysteries that may never be solved, questions that push against the boundaries of human understanding. What troubles me most is the possibility that the Torres family's transformation wasn't unique, that other wilderness disappearances might involve similar processes that we simply lack the technology to detect. How many missing hikers might still exist in states that our definitions of life and death can't accommodate? How many families have been absorbed by the landscapes they loved, continuing some form of existence that we're only beginning to understand? The wilderness keeps its secrets, but sometimes technology catches up with mysteries that seemed unsolvable. The Torres family was found after 33 years, but their discovery opened doors to possibilities that might have been better left closed. Some questions, once asked, can never be unanswered. Some mysteries, once solved, reveal that the solution is more disturbing than the original disappearance ever was. What do you think really happened to the Torres family? Could they have survived 3 decades in some form beneath the mountain? Or did my Apple Watch detect something else entirely? Something that science hasn't yet learned to explain? Are there other families out there, transformed by wilderness processes we don't understand, existing in states between life and death that our technology is just beginning to detect? Share your theories in the comments below. But be warned, some mysteries are better left unexplored, some discoveries better left unmade. The Torres family found something in that Montana wilderness, or something found them, and the evidence suggests that transformation might be more permanent than death itself.